There is some kind of a fancy microphone here, and it's meant to pick up what I'm saying. Is it working?
Yes, yes.
Good. So, on behalf of the Sligo Field Club, I want to welcome you all. This is the Sligo Field Club event. My name is Martin Wilson. I'm a past president, and at short notice, I've got a job this evening. Our president is unable to attend, so I'm the stand-in. So, you might be familiar with the beautiful pillars in Union Wood, which were in a bad state of repair. They had been neglected. So thankfully, they have been restored. Thanks to Wendy Lyons and to the Follies Trust. And the Follies Trust, of course, is Primrose Wilson, who is responsible for the beautiful restoration that has been carried out there over the past few months. You might have seen some details of it in the Sligo Champion in the past few days. So, Wendy, who's the first speaker? Primrose is the first speaker. So I want you to give a warm round of applause to Primrose. Primrose, you're very welcome. Good to have you. So you explain the background to the pillars and the good work that you have done. And could I say, well done. I've seen them and they're looking very, very well down there. So a warm
Thank you very much, Martin, and it's lovely to be back in Sligo again. I'm a Roscommon woman, born and bred, and so Sligo is the next door county, so it's kind of all right. So anyway, the Follies Trust is an unusual organisation. It exists to restore structures across the island of Ireland, north and south. We're a charity based in the north. But it doesn't stop us working on various different projects right across the island. We have restored an obelisk on the north coast near Limavady, a column to the O'Brien family in County Clare, something in Kilkenny and Kildare. Altogether, we've worked in 13 counties. But this is the first one that we've done in County Sligo. And I want to say at the outset, what a pleasure it has been working in County Sligo. We have been working with Brendan and Sheila Gray, the owners of the lovely Gate Piers. And also we've been working with Siobhan Ryan, the Heritage Officer. We're working with Wendy Lyons, who's been a conservation advisor. And altogether, it's been a very pleasant and companionable exercise. But I thought it might be helpful to you to tell you a little bit about the Follies Trust. First of all, everybody sort of cringes a bit. Follies, what are they? Are they foolish, silly structures, extravagant, unnecessary, all that sort of thing? We have now been in existence for 16 years. In that time, we've restored 32 projects, as I say, across the island of Ireland. And I have yet to find one that has no use at all. They're always either an eye catcher, a boundary marker, they provide water, whatever. And I'm just going to show you 9 of the projects that we've been involved in. That's our logo. This is the first one. All of these are illustrated in our handbook, 15 years of the Follies Trust. The orange one, which I think everybody's pretty well has got a copy of, I hope so anyway. This was on top of the Crofton, one of the entrances to the Crofton estate in Moat Park. As you can see, he's got some fairly badly damaged legs. He was also had some bees coming out of his mouth. In fact, he ended up having rare bees, which meant it was even more difficult to get rid of them than ordinary bees. And he was in a very sorry state. In that case, we worked with the Roscommon Heritage Group, with the Heritage Officer, and with the Irish Georgian Society and the Follies Trust. And one way or another, we raised enough funds to have the work carried out. The lion had to be taken away, and he had to be restored in the Code factory, which is in Wiltshire. And he had to be driven over and restored and brought back. And as you can see, put back up again on the top of the thing. That's one of my favourite photographs, which is in the book. Because he's looking so happy again to have had his legs restored and all the rest. So that's one in Roscommon. This one is in County Westmeath, and it's called the Beehive hut, and it was erected by a man called Cook, who believed in reincarnation, and he thought he was going to be reincarnated as a bee. So he decided that if he built a beehive and was buried in a beehive and left a little hole in the top, then he'd get out. So anyway, and the next one shows it after it had been restored. It had been very happy. Thank you. And this is the O'Brien column, Cliffs of Moher, and many of you have probably got that little book, which I hope you'll find useful next time you visit the Cliffs of Moher. It was built to a landlord, Cornelius O'Brien, in the 1850s. And when we started work on this, and when they put up the scaffolding, we had a drone survey and discovered that actually the iron cramps were doing a lot of problems. When we put up the scaffolding, we discovered that actually that the urn, which was, how many tons, Ed, can you remember? There's more than that, I think. It was attached by a little fixing of about that size. Everybody wondered if I was being listed from side to side. So that is it, restored and affixed again. I think columns are wonderful because they serve to be such super eye catchers. Thank you. And this is a folly which is in County Galway, Lawrencetown. Many of you may know it. And there's a lovely group of people there, and they do a lot of very fine work. This is a historic photograph of a tinkering encampment. You can see just down the road with the Folly in the background. The Folly had a lot of vegetation and had some problems. And so that's it, it restored. It's on one of the roads out of Lawrencetown. Please do go and see it. One of the problems we had, you see those nice new gates? Well, before that, the gates used to go into the side of the Folly and were damaging it. Thank you. And this is the Strone Fountain in Kilkenny, near Thomastown, near the Long Nan, if any of you know it. And it was overgrown, as you can see. And Tully here in the Heritage Group had undertaken a survey, but didn't know how to take the project forward. So we worked with them. They're a lovely group. We restored the wall at the back, which you can see, removed the vegetation, got the pond back. This in the background is a slightly muddy looking bit. That was because the pipe which led into the fountain had been fractured, and it had to be reinstated. But it's a lovely thing. And a lot of people during lockdown would sit beside it and contemplate life and water and all the things one contemplated during those awful years that we all remember. And this, by contrast, is a watch house. For any of you interested in the linen trade, and I know Wendy is, watch houses were put on the bleach greens so that people could, so you had a man who sat there in these little watch houses, which had no doors. They were extremely uncomfortable. Some of them had no seats, and he guarded the linen night. And in this particular field in County Down, this little structure, the cows are extremely grateful for it because it's got wonderful the door now, the side of it, rubbing their necks up and down again. And so anyway, thank you. I thought I should show you gate piers just to prove that we did gate piers elsewhere as well. These ones are in Tullymore in County Down. And again, they're illustrated in the book. And it couldn't be much more different, could they, from yours? I'm conscious of the fact I'm not talking too long. Anyway, I'll have to tell you the story about the missing top. So that one. You see? Can you see it? It's missing. Anyway, when we started work on this, somebody said to us, you know, somebody's got that video. Nicholas, correct me. Video? Pinnacle. somebody's got that. So anyway, so we went to the local newspapers and got some publicity and said that if anybody had got it, we didn't want to know who had it. But if they could give it back, we could put it back up. Otherwise, we'd have to replace it with a new piece of stone. Anyway, nothing happened. And then we did this project in memory of a very beloved late trustee, Dick Oram. And Dick Oram's widow went to bed one night with her bins out, and in the morning, sitting beside the bins, so I don't know who left it there. We've never discovered from that day to this. I don't mind. We're just very grateful we got it back. We also put new gates in because the gate that was there before was incorrect. There were the fixings from it, and so anyway, so just in case you thought we never did gate repairs before. And this is a bathing hut in Armagh. A man called William Ogilvy, who married the Duchess of Leinster when the Duke died. He had been tutor to their children, and he was the father of their last child. And he set up a thing in Killock. I've forgotten. Ardglass in County Down. And so he tried to turn Ardglass into a health spa where people would come and they would bathe in the sea and all the rest. So this bathing hut was for ladies, so they could go in and discreetly walk down into the sea. And that's it, 5, 6, 9. We approached the local authority to tell them about this, to say that we would like to work on it, we would raise the money, we'd do the work, etc. But it belongs to you, so we need permission as the owner. And they said, Primrose, if we'd known that this was ours, we'd have knocked it down ages ago. Such is the joys of working with local authorities in Northern Ireland. So this is in County Offaly, and this is the Gloucester Folly, which was completely submerged in vegetation. And that's how it looks now. It's a most wonderful structure, just beside Gloucester House, which is a wedding venue. And Mary and Tom Alexander are the owners of it. And so it's just gives you a little bit of flavour of the sort of things we've done. And we've been enjoying very much doing this project in Sligo. And I'm deeply grateful to everybody who is involved, to the owners, Brendan and Sheila, Ray, also to Martin Wilson as a contractor, to Follies, and to Beehive Ironworks. But the person who really knows all the details and all the important parts is Wendy. And so I'm going to hand over to Wendy. Wendy has been an absolutely marvelous person to work with. It's a great pleasure to hand over to her now. Thank you.
I don't know about that, but anyway, thank you all for coming. I'm delighted to see so many people here. It's more than I thought would come. And I have to say that this project wouldn't have been finished as well without the tenacity and powers of persuasion of Primrose. She's very good at all those things, and I'm very good at most of those things. So she was very, very important to the completion of this project. So I think to start at the beginning, they're very small, but they're very important for the locality. Everybody who walks in Union Wood sees them, whether they are aware of them because they walk past them. But hopefully after tonight, you'll know a little bit more about them and understand a little bit more as to why I think they're so important. And I'm not alone in that. This is the man who owns them and ordered that they should be built. So to actually set the scene, I think we need to do a little bit of history about him, and then I'll do a little bit about the wood before I actually get to go about it. He was Edward Joshua Cooper, and he took over the management of Markree in 1830. His father had died at that time, and his father had been managing the estate for Joshua Edward Cooper, who was deemed to be incapable of managing the estate. Coopers are obviously very short names. You're either Edward Joshua or Joshua Edward. So for this part of the talk, I'm just going to call him Colonel Cooper, because it's easier for my brain and I hope for yours. Colonel Cooper was had just maintained the estate. He didn't really do very much with it in the early 1800s. Before that, they had been buying a lot of land, probably mostly from Union Wood back out towards Leitrim, round Castlederragh, not any of the lands that were belonging to Castlederragh, but out of that country they bought a lot of land for forestry. And that was in the 1700s. So anyway, Edward Joshua, the young man, he went to school in Armagh, in the Royal School in Armagh, and then he went to Oxford. His mother was from India. She had been brought up in India. So she was looking at a southern sky all the time. So when she came to Mercury, the sky was very different. But she was very interested in astronomy. And she passed that on to her son, who was very, very interested in astronomy. And he took it up another level, completely up another level. So he went traveling. He did the grand tour. He was 2 years in Oxford, decided he'd learned enough from them that he'd go his own way. So he ordered the largest telescope in the world at the time, and he had it built by Grubbs in Dublin. And he then went traveling to Norway with this telescope, 13.5 centimeters or inches across, but it was over 17 feet long. So that was in his luggage. Ryanair wouldn't like to see him. Well, he was away for 2 years, and he went from Norway all the way down to Egypt studying the stars. And he set this telescope up wherever he went and studied the stars. But also he was in Italy. He was in Italy for quite a long time, and in Rome. So he saw the Roman classical architecture as he went, and he learned a great deal. He's a very well educated man and a very well read man. So he arrived back in Ireland and into Sligo in 1830, his father died. So he set about modernizing and improving the estate. So to improve the estate, what do you do first if you're an Irishman? You do the front gate. Next. So he decided he'd have a new front gate. And he, in those days, the architects, to get their projects known, would do a book of various different designs. They could be stewards' houses, cottages, gates, gatehouses, a whole collection of different designs. And this one is by Francis Goodwin, and he designed this. This was the last design in the book, design number 32. And he chose this design. This was probably in 1833, 34. So he designed, and he said, I'll have one of those. So he did. And here even you can have your own coat of arms put on top. So it was duly built. Next. So I was curious to know what the decoration was in the Beehive cottage. At the same time, I wasn't very knowledgeable about crests and coats of arms. So I luckily was given some information about Peter Henry through my activity. And the crest that you see on the left is the one in the Beehive cottage. Crest on the right is over the front gate on the end floor. The lions, I'm afraid, are well and truly fallen apart, but you can still see the diagonal piece across the way. Now, a crest is the first corner of the coat of arms. That's the difference between a crest and a coat of arms. Coat of arms is the whole thing, and a crest is part of the coat of arms. And this was owned by Colonel Cooper, and I actually think it was before him as well. He didn't have a new coat of arms. He didn't make a new coat of arms. He inherited that coat of arms. But Edward Joshua decided he'd have something different. I suspect after his wife died, his first wife died, he changed the coat of arms to this. And this is the book print that he would, every book that came into market would have had that on it. Books in those days were very valuable, and they would have wanted them not to lose them. So if they lent them to anybody, which apparently they did, they would like to get them back. So if you put your book plate on the front of it, you're most likely to get it back. It's very hard to lose it and say, oh, I didn't know it was yours. Next. And the next thing he built for himself, because don't forget, he was a man that was trying to continue his passion, really, and his passion was astronomy. And he built the largest and the best observatory in the world. It was much, much better and more well known than Burr at the time. Burr was only starting up. And this is, this is the telescope. And that was how it was governed around. The circle was a track all the way around. So that photograph was taken in 1860, but it was built in 1835. So even before he inherited the estate, he was doing an awful lot of building work. So now he built himself an observatory, he built himself his front gate. Next. So then he had to do something with the house. So the house was a house at that stage, it wasn't a castle. So he decided that he would employ a man called Joseph Gwilt. He was building from 1839 to 1842. And he took the front door from there and he pushed it around to there. He built this, he built that, all in a very short space of time. Builders, please note what they could do in those days. And so he had his house finished then. So you might think, well, no, that's enough. But no, his first wife died, and she died in childbirth, and his only son lived for 4 weeks after she died. So he decided that he'd take the roof off the local parish church, which was St. Paul's in Killarney, and he would build a new wing. Then in the vestry books, you will find that it's always talking about the leaks in the roof. So it probably wasn't a bad thing to do to start again. So he rebuilt St. Paul's. He rebuilt St. Paul's and he put a mausoleum in there, or a memorial to his wife. And that was made by a man called Gibson, who was Welsh, living in Italy, never came to Ireland, and the memorial was delivered to Ireland and it's in the church to this day. It's a very fine carved memorial. But he was very happy with his new church. And the next thing is, the Methodists came to town, and he was a very keen churchman, but he did not approve of the Methodists. And the Methodists were keen to purchase a piece of ground on the corner, which had been owned by the state and was bought by the state all the years ago, or set aside by the state as a barrack, a very big barrack that were going to build in Killarney. They ended up only building a small one, police barracks. So there was plenty of land to spare. And the Methodists decided that's where they wanted their church. And try as he might, he could not persuade Dublin Castle not to sell to the Methodists. So the church was built. So he vowed when the church was built, he would never, ever enter Killarney again. And he didn't. He then decided next that he would build a church in Balsadare. But he couldn't build a parish church. He wasn't allowed to build a parish church. He could only build a chapel of ease. So his chapel of ease was built in Balsadare. And he then had to do something else. He had to then improve the road to Balsadare from the castle. And it went through Union Road. So that's why I believe, and I could be wrong, but I think, next one is the map, that he improved the cottage in Union Wood to the photograph we saw first of all. It really is a cottage ornée in that photograph. It's very, very delightful, and he would have passed it on his way in and out. Even if he was going to Sligo, he went that way. He didn't go the traditional way into Sligo. He avoided Killarney at all costs. He wasn't very happy camper about Killarney. So now that's really telling you about the man who built the pillars. So now I'm just going to give you a small bit of information about Union Wood. There's been many people have said very many stories about Union Wood, and the name, how it gets its name, I was always told it was the sappers couldn't say unction when they were doing the survey. But Pat O'Brien, of course, has the correct version. In the 1700s, they were giving names to places. And the name in Irish is Onignon. an Union, which means an anvil. And if you look at Union Rock, it sticks out bareheaded past everything else. So it does look like an anvil. So that's where the name came from. All the other stories are apocryphal. There's two other stories that are apocryphal. One is there's a sign at the bottom of the Union Rock that says the cannon of 1798 was placed on the top. Well, now you've got a 2-2 rifle. From there, now the battlefield is down here. Good 2-2 rifle would be there. And certainly a cannon. Cannon for the Battle of Carrigagat here. So that's one of them. And the other one was really about the Union Jack flying every time the tenants would pay their rent. And I asked Francis Cooper about that one day. Yes, the client's mad. And he said, why would they need a flag to tell them when they wanted to pay the rent? They were to pay the rent. He said they would come with the rent or an excuse why they hadn't got the rent. He said they all knew when to pay the rent. Everybody knew when it was there. So there's another thing about Union Wood is that Coopers really valued it as a commercial enterprise because there was a chemical factory in Collooney, which was the old linen mill, but it was now classed as a chemical factory, and they needed charcoal and timber to feed the making of these chemicals. Now, I think the chemical is carbide, but that's what they were making, and so therefore, that's why the woods were expanded, and that's why it was a really big business, as well as a pleasure ground as a deer park. They did both. They didn't actually just have it as one. They were well able to make money out of it as well. Right, we'll go to the next. So we're now back here at the pillars themselves. And when I heard about how they started was the Follies Trust came to Markry to do a weekend trip or a 2-day trip to look at gate lodges. Now there are 9 gate lodges in Markry. So I took them around most of them, and then we got here to the gate lodges, to the pillars. And the 2 men were very, very interested in them and said to me they were completely unique. Well, now J.A.K. Dean, otherwise known as Dixie Dean, had said they were completely unique. There's nothing like them in the British Isles. So I thought they were special, but I didn't really think about it too much more than that. So long story short, Primrose rang me and asked me who owned them. So I said, well, Brendan Gray, as far as I know, owns them. So I went and I talked to Brendan and Sheila, and they both said, yes, they did own them. And yes, they would be very willing to have them conserved. So that's how the process started. Thankfully, Primrose did all the paperwork. I didn't have to do paperwork. Anyone who's ever filled in an application for grant will know that the paperwork is huge. So she did that, and I then went off to Clearly Stone in Boyle. Now they'd worked for me before, and they've always managed to do the repairs very well. So I went to them, and they gave me a price and said yes, they could do it. So they agreed to do it. So that was it. I knew that I had 2 very interesting pillars, but more than that, I didn't know very much more about it. So you see this gentleman here. He has what's known as a bundle of rods in his hand, and he has a hatchet, which is what I call them up to now, is a facet when it's a ceremonial hatchet, when it's not used in violence. It's not called a hatchet anymore, it's called a facet. So that little bundle of rods and the facet sticking out the top is very reminiscent of the pillars that we have in Markry. So I thought, right, I better search a bit more. So I discovered then that the consuls in Rome used to have a lictor walking in front of them, and he was either a slave, a servant, or a soldier, depending on whether the crowd were going to be very positive towards the consul or whether they was going to have a battle in his hand, depending on which sort of lictor he had walking in front of him. But they never ever went anywhere without a lictor. This was a ceremonial way of this was representing law and power of the consul. So that was where it led me to think that this was very much a ceremonial pair of pillars. The next one. So I thought, right, we now know there are ceremonial pillars. We now know that they represent law. So we have to find a 19th century pillar or statue. So it didn't take me very long. Archbishop Beresford in Primate of all Ireland commissioned John Lanyon and Belfast architects to design Campanile in Trinity College. And this Campanile was to have an arcade going in that direction and that direction. But that was never done. So Lanyon built the Campanile, and he also had to get 4 statues. One was to represent law, divinity, science, and medicine. So these are the 4 statues. There's divinity, there's law, well, the other 2 are at the back, medicine and science. So that was fine. I then had to discover who did it, because he obviously had an understanding of classical architecture, and he was obviously a very good carver. So Christina Casey says in her Pesler guide that it's Thomas Kerr, but Trinity College say it's his son, Joseph Robinson Kerr, who was also a sculptor and a very good sculptor. So then I went looking to see where I get another one, another statue, rather than busts. Busts are very popular, they're all over the place, but you can't really tell very much from the bust. So I went looking for another statue. Didn't take me very long. Banbridge. This is Captain Crozier, an Arctic explorer, all the way from Banbridge. He was a native of Banbridge. He actually got back from the Arctic. So I think that's why they actually did a monument to him. But these are wonderful polar bears. The detail is fantastic on it. Next. And why I really wanted to show you this is because the detail here of the strings that are holding on his jacket, the buttons on his wrist, are so exact. They're like the bottom of the B-steps on the pillars. B-steps are so delicately carved. You can even see the strings that would have sewn the straw together. So it's my opinion, that's not fact yet, but I'm working on making it a fact, that these 2 pillars in Paluni were carved by Joseph Robinson Kirk. Next. So that brings me to the pillars, back now down finally to the pillars. This is the condition they were in when we started. And this was all from water. And once the iron starts to expand, it accelerates because it expands. And once you get a crack in the stone, the water gets into the stone, it freezes, and so the rest is history. So they were in very poor condition from that point of view, but wonderful other than that. Now they had been moved in 1950. Brendan told me that when he bought the land off the forestry, he wanted an extra bit. So he bought an extra bit. So the pillars were moved to his boundary, to his new boundary. So I was very pleased to think that it actually been picked up and moved once. So if you move them once, you can move them twice. That's what I had in my little brain. Next. And this is really what a close-up of what the stonework looked like. And you can see the actual huge crack in that one as it's being moved back to the workshop. Feelystone said yes, they could fix them, and yes, they wanted to do it in their workshop. So in June, they went off to the workshop. We were supposed to have them back for Heritage Week in August, but that didn't quite happen. Next. So when they were gone, we then had to put in a new foundation under the base because you couldn't put them on the existing foundation. I was worried about putting them on the existing foundation because I didn't think it was very good, and I was a bit anxious about it. So we lifted out the bases. Martin Wilson did that work for me, and we looked and we looked and we looked. There was nothing. Next. So we went back to the old photograph, and sure enough, there's a cut stone plinth underneath. So I'm always scratching my head and fussing and worrying, and rang Primrose to say, what are we going to do? She said, don't panic. You can put a cut stone plinth on it. It's more expensive. What do we do? She said, don't worry. So I didn't. So I then rang Follies, and Follies said, oh yeah, we have plenty of sandstone. Next. So they had, that's what the foundation was, right? So it wasn't very, I wasn't going to put them back on that. So Follies Stone had a bundle, they said, of sandstone sills. So they would turn them upside down, because I wanted to chamfer on the plinth. I didn't want it straight because the water would lie out. So they said yes, they would fix them, and they could provide me with 2 plinths, but they would not fit the plinths in 4 pieces on site. They would have to fix the plinth next up in their workshop, because they said they couldn't be sure that the ground wouldn't rock, and if the plinths rocked, the whole thing would be out of line, and they didn't want that. So they this is what they did. They doweled each one and then glued the 4 of them together, and that's then going into position there. So that was fine. After a couple of days of everybody settling down and the pillars, all the plinths sat in place, we then put the beehives back. And here are the iron cramps. Well, these iron cramps are holding this stone, which is huge, and the stone at the far end together. So if you took that stone cramp out while we were moving them about and while we were doing anything, we would have real trouble. But basically that big stone would fall out. It had already moved a little bit, but it didn't move very much. And so we waited until they were going to actually put the pillars back on before the stone cramp, the iron cramps were taken out. And I'm just showing you this one, because in this one you can really see the very fine stitching on the beehive pillars. So when the next time you walk past them, stop, have a look, and look at the stitching, because it really is quite extraordinary, and the little holes in the V at the bottom. They're beautifully done, beautifully done. I do remember when I said to my mother-in-law when I came first 44 years ago, I said, what tell me about the pillars? She said, they're just his, he owned them and he liked different things. I said, all right. And she said, and I always wanted a bee skin, like they had at the bottom. But my mother wouldn't let me. She was afraid of bees. And so with that wonderful explanation, I never thought more about them. Now, here we are in the workshop. Now, Follies Stone, I have to say, were excellent. They searched until they found matching stone, because that's really what matters in these occasions. If you do repairs and they're terribly obvious at the end, it's not terribly good. So they found a big slab of sandstone up the back of the factory, and they brought it down and they used it. And that's the sample there that they used. And next. So we're now really just looking at the pillars for what they are. This is before, when they clean them down a little bit so they can see what they're doing. This is, it's not finished, but it's a very good match. Now, when you see them finished, you won't have this line will be obliterated. Not because they have power washed and cleaned them. When you're doing conservation work, and I would say this to all of you in the room, if you're ever cleaning an old stone pillar or pier or whatever, even a gravestone, do not power wash it. Because when you do, all you're doing is taking the skin, the coat off it against the weather. It has to make a new coat. So by making a new coat, you're taking actual finish off the stone. So just treat stone with great care. Right? I know it's hard, but it needs to be treated with great care. Be very careful how you restore them. So this is the worst one. This is the one that worried me, but it didn't worry them. This split in half, and this is the iron cramp, the last iron cramp they're taking out of place. And I actually didn't know how they were going to get this back together again in one piece, and it looked half right. Next, that's it, finished. Crack is here. It's very hard to see. This is the new stonework on the front. They filled that with mortar. These are the 2 stainless steel clamps, new clamps. That they put in position. And that's just it finished. So then they came back. Then they came, put them all together that day. It was a long day. First thing they had to do was take the cramps out. And you see that on the left there, you see the picture of the two of them with the actual stainless steel rods with the going down that are bent to go down into the stone. So they were all had to be positioned first, and they were set with a very quick setting adhesive. And then they started to put them on top. The steel rods, the original iron rods were taken out, and they were new stainless steel rods put in them. The rods had to go into into each piece of the pillar so that they would be stable and stay where they were put. Next. There you see them putting in the next one. Quite a tricky job. And then they're getting up right up to the top. Next. And that's the before and after of the same pillar. That one, that one. I think it's very hard to see where the repairs are. Next one. And that's the other one. You see this huge piece missing? It's very hard to tell. There it is there. So the next time you go past them, you have to go really good look. Now, I haven't talked about the facets at all. So I'm going to tell you about them now. Brendan told me that his father, they had one stolen. So his father took the other one down so it wouldn't be stolen and put it in the shed. Father forgot about it. Brendan found it in the shed, took it down to Philip Gilligan, and he said, make me a copy. So Philip said, yes, he would. So Philip put it in his shed. Picked for a while, more than a while. And anyway, he made him a copy, and he brought them back to Brendan and said, here you are. Brendan nearly forgotten about it by then. So Brendan wedged them in place, and that's where they were for some time. You see the ash tree? They grow anywhere. So we took them out, and I brought them off to Bushy Park Foundry in Dublin, because Follies Trust said they had great success with them doing the work for them. And they conserved them for me and painted them a colour that Brendan and Sheila chose, and I think it's a great colour. And then they were put back in on the day and put into position. And they're well and truly glued into position, so they won't come out. And I think it's a great job. I think they look well. And this little fella here, somewhat an irritant for us when we were working, but anyway, we managed, is a people cat. And it belongs to the Parks and Wildlife, because they want to know how many people are going in and out of the neighbourhood. Well, there's an awful lot more people went in and out a couple of days we were doing the work, so we went back to support the bandits. So their count was a little bit astray. But I think it's a fine job done. Next. And I think that man would be that's Edward Joshua Cooper in old age. And I think he would have been very happy to see them restored. Thank you very much.
I think you all will agree that that was a wonderful talk, a wonderful lecture. We found out all about the Follies Trust from Primrose Wilson, and we got the complete background to the pillars. And I think you will agree that they told the story so well, both of them. A few days ago, when I heard about this lecture first, I said to Sally, I said, how is she going to make a lecture out of the conservation of the two pillars? And by God, she certainly did. And it was wonderful interest because you could hear a pin drop. And she had my attention for the whole time. And they both told it so well. I think it was amazing. And could I compliment Wendy on her research, the wonderful research she did. She started in the beginning and she followed all the way through. So I think tonight has been a great success. This is what we do in the Field Club. You know, there's lots of people here who come to every lecture, and we have about 9 of them every year. And here they are back again tonight. But there's a whole lot more people here in the room, and it might be their first time. So this will give you an idea of what we do. And if you're interested in joining, John, our treasurer, is at the back of the room, and he talked to him, and he has a full program from all the other events for the rest of the year.